Hello, I'm Catherine Stevens, and I'm with the Northeast Mississippi Historical and Genealogical Society. This is July the 28th, 2008. Terry Swindle, another member of the Society, is filming us today. And our guest is Mr. Bill Rieves. And Mr. Rieves, we want to welcome you today and thank you so much for coming and sharing some of your memories with us. To start off, will you give us just some of the typical biographical data, I guess I'll call it? You start off with your full name and your age and birthplace.
I was reared in the Red community, Monroe County. Born in 1926, which makes me 82 years of age. My parents were farmers. My father was I call a diversified farmer, because we had all the row crops that you normally have, plus a dairy along the side. So when I was the youngest of four boys there. When I was, of course, worked on the farm, but when I attended and finished Wren High School, when I was 18 years of age, on the 16th of March, 2 weeks later, I joined the Navy and spent 28 months in the Navy during World War II. It was some experience for a boy who had been very protective at home.
Yeah.
You know, and
where did you do your training?
I did my training at Camp Perry, Virginia, a base that they had just created to take care of the many young men who need to go through boot camp. I finished my boot camp, and they sent us to New York, Brooklyn, to Pier 92. Pier 92 is where the immigrants used to come in, and they were processed as they came into the country. But they used that for a place for sailors to wait for assignment. And fortunately, I was assigned to a new ship, one who had not been commissioned at that time, but in a few weeks it was commissioned, and I was aboard that ship. I have my picture of my ship.
What was
But it's Anthony Cunningham. I'm sorry.
we can get the pictures
all right,
later. That'll be
all right.
fine. Cunningham, you said?
Anthony Cunningham. And of course, that afforded me the opportunity to grow up, to mature, and to learn a great deal. If I could just elaborate on that just a little bit. The ship was commissioned in the Brooklyn Navy Yard, and I was very fortunate. My father and my older brother came to New York for the commissioning ceremony at that time. We, after its commission, we went out around the New England coast, but a lot of people did not realize at that time that the German submarines were creeping in, trying to come up close to the American shores. And so we chased the German submarines. But also in the meantime, a new ship with a new crew had to have what they call a shakedown cruise. And we were assigned to go to Bermuda Islands for that. Coming through Cape Hatteras, we had encountered a storm, and the ship listed such that the smokestack took on water. And a wave hit it just right and uprighted the ship. And we then had to go back into we went to Norfolk, and they put concrete in the hull of the ship to give it bullet edges so it would. And you can imagine a new guy with no experience as a sailor, how frightened I was at that time. But nevertheless, we got that remedied and went on to did some sailing around the eastern side of Cuba, the Dominican Republic, and so forth, just as a training for a new crew there. Finally, through the Panama Canal, we left Norfolk, which I think is important to say, on May the 7th, 1944, 45. That is when the peace in Germany, it's a bittersweet day. Germany surrendered that day, and we left port that day, going to the Pacific.
Yeah.
Finally, we went through the canal, Panama Canal, and on to Honolulu. I was a radar operator. Radar operator worked on a glass top table similar to this, and when he observed objects flying in the air, you would chart what you see, the direction they was going and the speed they were going. And then by radio they could find if they were friend or foe, like that. And when we got into a combat situation, a more experienced, more knowledgeable person would come and handle my job. And I would go to a 5-inch gun mount, and I would put the powder keg in the tray. Someone else put the projector, and when they gave the word, we could fire, like that. My first combat mission was at Wake Island. We were there, and the Japanese had taken it over, and they had planes, had aircraft carriers there, and other ships, and we were a destroyer, and we were there protecting the aircraft carriers, because as they were trying to catapult the planes off the deck of the aircraft, someone had to watch for what was overhead, and that was our mission, our goal, and we reclaimed the island at that time. Went ahead to a lady in the Philippines, and then on to Okinawa, or close by Okinawa, patrolling to try to intercept any trade that the Japanese might have, ships coming in and going. And of course, certainly we had raids every night and so forth. One of the things that I remember distinctly was when we were somewhere off Wake Island, the skipper had the boatswain to pipe our attention, and all he said was, the President of the United States is dead. They remember who Roosevelt was and how long he served, and the only president that I knew,
Right.
And it was that was a kind of a joke, frankly, that when he announced to us that the President Roosevelt had died. But we went ahead and eventually, whenever the war was over, the bomb was dropped at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But we remained in that area for a long time, patrolling. It had the opportunity to go to see ports in Korea, on into Shanghai, China. And one of the ports that I distinctly remember, we went to Daired, which was Manchuria. They don't call it Manchuria today. but we were there to escort prisoners of war. And the men were brought down to the pier, and they had to change clothes there on the pier before they could come aboard the hospital ship for sanitation reasons and so forth. And I vividly remember the shape they were in as they came aboard the hospital ship.
Excuse me, I imagine they were very emaciated after all that time.
They were
in
very
prison.
emaciated. I have a picture of something similar to that. But finally, the time had come and I could come back, and they brought us back to San Francisco and back home, the Millington base, to be discharged and come home. That was an experience certainly I wouldn't have wanted. But as I look back, I'm so grateful that I had the experience.
Yes.
And as I said, it was a true learning experience.
How long were you in the Pacific? I know you took part in those battles.
We were in the Pacific about 22 months there.
Mm-hmm.
Coming home, I had no idea what I would do, like the young people today.
Mm-hmm.
And by coincidence, I carried someone to a community college to back to school. And while there, this individual said, "Come on, I want you to meet some people." And we met the dean, and we met the president, and we met, I came home and packed my bags, and I went back to school. I enrolled, and that was down at East Mississippi Community College.
Where is that located?
Scuba.
Scuba. Okay.
That's in Scuba. And bear in mind now, there were only Moorhead, and let's see, there was no Northeast, and there was no Itawamba. But anyway, I was there. Of course, that's where I met my wife.
Uh-huh.
We met.
Where was she from, Bill?
She was from Golden, Mississippi, which is just, she's close to Red Bay, Alabama, right on the line there. And I say we had sort of a whirlwind courtship. Within a year, we were married, sophomores in college. Now I can bear that in mind. But it was probably good for me because she was more disciplined than I.
I was going to say, it forced you to settle down, too.
It forced me to settle down. But we came up to Mississippi State, and we graduated there, and I got my master's at Mississippi State. And, of course, she graduated at State, and then her master's at Ole Miss. And I did some postgraduate work at Ole Miss, and at one time was in a doctoral program, but I couldn't handle my responsibility at school and that at the same time. My teaching career, after we finished, there was a junior high at Golden, and so I went up and was a teacher at Golden and basketball coach. It was someone said, "Well, what did you teach?" And I said, "Whatever they had needed. If it was science or math or what,
Right.
As long as you had a degree in a 48 9, that's what they wanted. The degree was more important than your certification there." And so she taught English at that time, and we had a good experience. However, I wasn't really truly happy in some ways, and I came down to Nettleton, and the superintendent says, "I have nothing to offer." And as I started out, he said, I have a fifth grade, and said, would you consider being a teaching principal of the elementary, and teach the fifth grade? I didn't have a job, and I was smart enough to say yes. I'll do that. And we taught 3 years. My wife's major is business education, and she also had an English. In those days, you could have a minor, and so she taught business education, and I was the elementary principal. And then the second year, I became a seventh grade teacher. And truthfully, I guess that's where I learned to teach. You know, they were wonderful kids, and I was young, and we enjoyed it, and the people were so nice, but as time goes on, there was a lady who was an elementary supervisor for Lee County Schools, named Wilma Long, Mrs. Eugene Long. And she gave my name to the superintendent of schools in Tupelo. And he called me and asked if I'd like to come up and talk to him. And they had just built Joiner School, and were going to open it for the first year. But we were enjoying nothing, so I declined. The second year he called me and said, I have Rankin School open. Would you like to come up and talk to me? So Dot and I talked about this, and we thought, well, this is it. He won't call the third time. So I came up to Rankin School, and I became their principal there in 1953. Also, I was a sixth grade teaching principal. They had 7 classroom teachers plus me. The bell was behind the door in my classroom. The telephone behind the door in the classroom, and I was the teacher. The second year, though, we added a couple of teachers, and I no longer taught. I became a full-time administrator. Rankin School, I think the word school Rankin was named after Congressman John E. Rankin. He owned property in that area, and they named the school after him. Mr. Rankin used to, when he retired from Congress, would come back and he would visit us at the school. And because he was kind of old and senile, but he would say, now what do you want and what do you need? And of course he could not, but anyway, I was pleased to know him and so forth.
Did he live here in Tupelo?
He did. He lived on Main Street. It's the house next to. Oh,
it's the one that's now a restaurant.
Yeah, that's
right.
Exactly right.
Yes,
right.
Rankin. I'd forgotten that.
Yeah, that's a restaurant. I was principal at Rankin School for 5 years, and I've always had a ball. I enjoyed it, and the people were so nice. I learned at the elementary and junior high level, if you showed love and compassion for their children, the parents will love and show respect to you. And I just had a good time. The superintendent called me one day and said, Milam Junior High is coming open in the fall, and I'd like for you to consider moving from the elementary up to junior high. Well, that was a pretty good move, because they had 25 teachers there in a big school, grades 7 through 9 there. You remember the high school was adjacent to the junior high. The junior high was a building along Gloucester Street, and the high school faced Jefferson and near Robin Street. And it was connected with arcade. It had several columns out connecting the two buildings. I 3 years there, and it was a good experience for me, and we enjoyed it very much there. Then the high school opened up, and the board asked me if I would like to consider going to the high school to be principal. Now, this was the first year for the high school to be on Varsity Drive. I was the first principal in that building, and I served there for 10 years as a high school principal. I love the high school work because there are so many activities going on. You have your sports, you have your musicals, you have your academics. There's something going on all the time, and it's just a great a place to work. And of course, as we grow older, the teachers, we get sort of thinking that what I'm teaching is the only subject, you know. Mm-hmm. And I've had some experiences trying to explain to some of them that we're just one spoke in the wagon wheel, but we can go from there. But we had our first high school musical when I was out there. We had our first vocational education, and we built the building for the vocational work. It was, let's see, well, just several things that I had the privilege of helping to do. One of the things, there was in the, let's see, in the 60s, the idea came up to do team teaching, where you would put two teachers together and maybe 60 students and the same subject and so forth. We experimented with that, and to some degree were successful in it. Parade magazine recognized us as an outstanding school for being innovative in our work there. It was we built the auditorium, the civic auditorium, while I was there, and we built the round on the east end there. But school being, it's interesting that when the high school was built there were residents of Tupelo who complained. They said it was too far out. They didn't want to go that far out of town. It was, they had bodock bushes, trees there, and it was a limestone kind of, and cedar trees, and they just thought it was too far out. But soon, the growth of the town expanded, and it made it necessary. Another thing that I remember, of course, integration came to our school system, and we were determined that we would not let the federal government tell us how to integrate. And so we got our citizens together, black and white, and worked out a plan. And the plan was for the year or two have freedom of choice. If any child wanted to come to either school, they could. Now we had several outstanding black students. We had two teachers, black teachers, who were most helpful to me because they understood the culture, they understood when questions come up that I didn't, and I could talk with them and so forth. It just worked. It just worked fine with these two teachers. And then, when you started integration, you had there were redneck white people and there were black people. Both did not want to integrate. And they wanted to keep their school at Carver and the others, and it put some pressure on administration to make sure everything was going smooth, and there wouldn't be any real problems. And thankfully, we were able to manage that during that time. Then the board said to me, "We'd like for you to come to be assistant superintendent, and we want you to handle the curriculum for the district and professional personnel," which was a great job, but you miss the students. You miss all the activities that go on in the building, say. But for about 16 years, I was the curriculum person from grades K through 12. And I did interviewing and employing personnel for that. Tupelo has been very good to me. I had the privilege of being here 34 years. When I was high school principal, a lot of things happened. One of the things that I remember, the day that John F. Kennedy died. And I thought about what to do. I knew it was a day of history and so forth. And I announced to the student body that the president had been shot. And I said to the teachers, we have television sets in some rooms. We didn't have them in every room. But feel free to group your students together and turn the TVs on and see what's going on in the country. I put one in the cafeteria, and the group went to the cafeteria. But I felt like that was important, that they have the privilege of seeing history in the making. And so they just stopped what they were doing, and we did that.
What year was that? Was it 70 or?
66.
63?
63.
Well, who was? There was some
was that Bobby?
assassination in 70, and I can't remember because I remember that one on television.
Yeah. Well,
Well, you're right. That was a great learning experience for them to see just what happened.
It sure was.
Nationally.
Yeah. Not to be bragging, I suppose. I don't mean it that way, but our curriculum that the teachers had developed was used in several schools in the state. And when we go to the national conventions, like I'd go to the National Association of Assistant Superintendents or Superintendents, we would sometimes carry a display of our material, and we'd have requests from all over the country for it, and it was used. I had come to be approaching 65 years of age, and I had said to Mr. Morgan, our school board president, this is my last year, and you need to start looking, I prefer you would tell it, but just wait and I'll properly resign at the end of the year. Well, the superintendent of schools got a job at Stanford University as Dean of Education.
Mm-hmm.
They said, well, you can't retire. You've got to stay on. So I stayed on one more year as superintendent, acting superintendent of schools here.
Mm-hmm.
So from as far as I know, I'm the only person that has had that broad of experience in the school system.
Mm-hmm. Well, you have had that.
I've had that.
What did you like best about it? Like you said, I know I've been through the same thing you have. I didn't go as high as you did. Well, I was in supervision, and I missed the kids.
Yeah. The first year that I went to the central office to work, the school started, and I got up early, 7 o'clock, went to the office. I was the only one there.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, the others came in at 8 o'clock. And I said, is this the way it is, Mm-hmm. They said, sure, you've changed roles. And, Christmas, the excitement of elementary school and other schools at Christmas time, you miss that when you're in central office,
Mm-hmm.
in administration there. It's just you miss. But you get some other things there, some other advantages there.
Well, let's see now. Tell me a little bit about just Tupelo in general. When you were, since you've been here so long, what changes have you noticed occurring around here?
Well, let's go back to Rankin School.
Okay.
There were, of course, there were houses there, but not as many as we have now. I can remember that in the spring of the year, the a farmer, would bring his wagon and mules and plow and go and plow up gardens for people in the neighborhood, and I can remember coming into Tupelo on a 2-lane, Highway 6 was 2 lane.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a little grocery store out there, a little private, individually owned grocery store. It was, but it began to grow. Thomas Street was a gravel road. Very few, if any, houses was on Thomas Street. There were 4 elementary schools. There was Lawhorn, Church Street, which would be the oldest, Rankin School, and then when I came here, Joanna was 1 year old there. Of course, Church Street was recognized as the, prima donna of the schools. Even when I was here, they had a wonderful lady there who was a long-time principal, Miss Oline Coffey.
Yeah, she was mine.
Was she?
Mm-hmm.
And she was a great person and a good principal.
Mm-hmm.
And we, but,
So you really just noticed the main thing you're saying, I think, is the growth of Tupelo.
The growth of Tupelo, it began to grow out west.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let's take Rankin School. it expanded once while I was there, built on. After I left Rankin and moved on to junior high or high school, it has 2 times more they've added to the building there. So it's I must say this: when you retire, and I'm fortunate enough to live here, I get to see former students often, and I get to see the successes, their success, and it's almost weekly, maybe more frequently, when I'm at downtown or at a business somewhere. They'll walk up to me and introduce themselves and tell me, where they were or what, what grade they were in and so forth. Recently, a newspaper did a little story on my family here, and it's because this coming year is the first year in 55 years there won't be a Rieves in the school system.
Mm-hmm.
I received a letter a couple of weeks ago from a former student who was down in Florida. His sister had sent her a copy of that, and he was reminiscing about the bell behind the door and me teaching principal, being out of the room some, and so forth. And it was just great to hear from him there. When I was in the Navy, I was fortunate enough to get a souvenir, and I have here a sword that I brought home from Okinawa.
Mm-hmm.
It has the rising sun, the Japanese flag.
Uh-huh.
You see here, and I have kept it in pricing it. I also have an wood anchor at home that they did. In retirement, I've done some things that I wrote this. It says Times and Things Remembered. This is something that I had done for my children.
Uh-huh.
And in it,
Let me move that. I'll get that moved so he can see that better.
in this, I have started when I was a child, as far back as I can remember. And I round up through school, and my college days, our courting days, and put some pictures in here to help him remember.
Well, now you said you did this for your children. You have 2 daughters,
With
of course.
2 daughters and a son.
And a son?
My son works in industry. He's a purchaser for Lane Furniture.
Mm-hmm.
His name is Rob.
Mm-hmm.
Rob spent 10 years in the Army, finished college, and had his commission, and
Mm-hmm.
he served in Desert Storm
Uh-huh.
and some other, but several months, 18 months, I believe, on the DMZ in Korea. But he's here in town. I'm fortunate to have all 3 of my children here in town. The change that I have observed, it's some of the same things. You drive downtown, there's Reed's. Of course, Reed's has has done some changes. There was a Strand Theater just east of Reeves, about where the ladies' dress shop. And then of course the Malco Theater.
We had only two at one time, Lyric and the Strand.
That's right, the Lyric, right. And one of the things that when I was in the elementary school, it was a 9.5 months job, and you had to find employment, during the summer. The public health department, Lee County Health, hired me to go out and to, as a better term, be a health educator, and to get people to take their polio, typhoid, whatever shots they were needed. I would go to homes that looked like they may have neglected to do that, and I would explain to them the importance of taking a shot. Now, if you'll go up to a certain church or a certain school on a certain day, the nurses would be there, and I was quite successful in getting them up there, because someone making that type of appeal to them. I never did like to take a shot myself, and I'm still not too.
I'm with you there.
When I was an elementary principal, the nurse, the health department would come to the building and give shots to the children. And I would go like in this room, and I'd bring that group out and let them line up and get their shots, but I would leave. I would go to the other room. I never would stand around and watch them get their shots.
You and I have something in common. Well, do you remember any political campaigns in particular in Tupelo, or nationally either?
Last evening, my son-in-law and I were talking about the political campaigns, not any specific ones, but we talked about the oratory of the politicians. There would be a speech time at the courthouse square. And if you were running for district attorney or sheriff, whatever, this is the time that you spoke. And I can remember one man in particular who had a vocabulary such that he could talk about the shivering waters of the Tongue-Bigby and so forth. Very, very colorful in his language. But I don't remember participate. I never have participated personally in election politics. I'm a firm believer in it, and I'll be there voting. But I never did participate.
Before we get away from the education part of your life, do you remember the names of the two teachers that helped you so much with integration?
Yes, I do. There was a Mrs. Margaret Walker, who she was from Oklahoma, but she was a super history teacher, and she's had the personality. She had the personality, and then I had a Mr. Horton. Mr. Horton had served as a principal up in Tishomingo County. And those two people were very, very helpful to me during that time. We had other minority teachers later, but for a few years they were the two. I can recall one time the black students left the band hall. They just walked out and just sat down. They were on strike. And I didn't know exactly what to do, so I asked Mrs. Walker, Miss Walker, will you go down and find out what the problem is? And she came back laughing. Though they had been at Carver under Mr. Partlow, the band director, and then they moved over to Mr. Stevens in our building, and they had a different style of conducting music. See, and the students had said, when they got over to the high school, and Mr. Stevens was more, he wasn't as jivey. So they just said, we aren't going to play that white music. And Mrs. Walker said, there is no white music. There's music. And it's played like the band director wants it played. Get in, get in there, you know. And it was, see, little things like that.
You had to know how to deal with these matters here.
Had to deal with these matters, you know. And also when I was high school principal, long hair became fashionable for the boys. Now, we had a board member who was in the National Guard, a high-ranking officer, and he always kept a trimmed, sharp haircut, and he couldn't stand to see boys with hair down over their collars. And the board said to me, Bill, you can't have that, so you must enforce. I did. Now, as I look back, that wasn't too important. You know, you look back. But I did. And it caused me some problem. In fact, I went to court.
Oh, really?
And I won my case there in court. There's this student who filed suit against the high school and me concerning his hairstyle. But you know, I was at a predicament. I was doing what the school board said do. You know, and took a pretty good rep sometimes because of that. But as I look back, it was okay.
Just some of our growing pains.
Growing pain, yeah.
We've been through a lot of that.
We sure have. We sure have.
I keep looking at your sword. Could you tell me how you said you got it on Okinawa, and what was the circumstances of that?
Well, actually, I bought this.
Oh, you bought it?
I bought it. There was I was able to go. I was able to go ashore. And some guy had it and said he would sell it, and so I bought it. So that was my souvenir there from there.
What we'll do is take those later, Mr. Reeve. I want my last question I want to ask you before, and is this: what advice would you give to young people nowadays? Can you, based on your experiences, you've had such a long career in education and working with them.
Well, now I tell you what I believe. I don't think children have changed. I think parents have changed. And I think parents need to take a good look at themselves. Homes are different today than when I began. oh, mercy, if I had a problem with a student, all I had to do is call daddy or mother, and that was resolved right then. Oh, I might call boys might smoke in the bathroom, and I'd give them 3 licks, and I'd say to them, okay, I'm going to give you 3 licks, or you may go home. What you want? Well, they didn't want to go home. They wanted to take their 3 licks and go back to class. And right or wrong, that's the discipline type, the way that I handle that.
And discipline is another matter now.
It's another matter now. And when I was principal, if a child was doing something that wasn't appropriate out of school, and the word had filtered back somehow to the counselor or to me, it would be all right for me to call John in and say, John, now this is not any of my business in a way, because it happened out of school. But, I like you, and let's talk about this a little bit. And we'd talk about it, and of course they sometimes, I don't say resented, but they might have a little hesitation. Nowadays, some of those guys will remember what we talked about. Dot and I were attending a funeral out in the country, and someone patted me on the shoulder. He said, "You don't know me, do you?" And I looked around and I said, "Yeah." He said, "Do you remember that day you called me in and we talked about something?" And I said, "Yes, I do." And he said, "Thank you." Yeah, but nowadays you can't touch a child. You can't. It's so much of the closeness is not there. In order, there is a feeling among some in Tupelo that the more money you pour into a school district, the better school you're going to have. Well, that isn't right. That isn't true. It's not the money, it's the quality of teachers you have and the resources you have. You got to have plenty. The money per se will not solve the problem.
It's amazing, isn't it, that studies show that, and yet people do not.
Studies show that, and people
listen to the facts.
Right. That's exactly right. It's I don't know. We schools are different today, and I often say that if one of the other principals, like Mr. Aaron Morgan and I, were still here, we'd be in parchment. They put us in jail because we had pretty strict discipline, and
the only thing we can hope for, I guess, Mr. Reeves, is for the self-discipline. In this age now, we're going to have to develop more of that.
That's right. It's and I have 2 grandchildren who are small, and I'm always concerned about them.
Well, I want to thank you so much for coming and visiting with us today and sharing some of your experiences and memories with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Pleasure being here.